Hello and welcome coders to the Sky Coding. So in today's video we will discuss about data sharing in Snowflake. We will discuss all about that how can we share the data to the Snowflake users and how to share the data to the non-Snowflake users. Okay, and we will discuss how to create a share and how to grant the permissions and all those things in this video. Talking about the previous video, so in the previous video we have covered time travel, zero copy cloning, data loading from internal external stages, and all those topics we have covered so far. And if you haven't watched my Snowflake tutorial series, then the link will be given in the description box. You can watch those playlist videos according to your need. Okay, so in today's video we will discuss all about the data sharing only. Okay, so let's get started and let's understand some of the concepts of the data sharing, that what is data sharing and how to share a data in Snowflake to the Snowflake users as well as non-Snowflake users. Okay, so let's move ahead without wasting any time. Okay, so what is data sharing? Okay, so it is written here. I have written some of the points as well. Okay, so data sharing, data can be shared securely. Okay, data can be shared securely in the Snowflake. Suppose that you want to share any database, schema or the table, then you can share that database or schema securely. Okay, you can share all those things securely in the Snowflake. Okay, so you can share data to other Snowflake users and not non-Snowflake users as well. As I have told you, you can share data to the Snowflake user which is having the Snowflake user already, or you can share to the non-Snowflake users as well by creating a reader account. Okay, we will discuss all those things. Okay, and the third point is written for non-Snowflake users. We have to create a reader account and share the data. Okay, and suppose that I want to share a data to any third person and that third person is not having their Snowflake account. So how can we share to that? So for that we have to just create a reader account from my own account of the Snowflake and give them the username and password of the reader account and share the data. And that reader account have the permission for just select only. He can just see the data. He is not able to perform the DML update, delete or like that. Okay, he is having just a permission for see the data. Okay, so this is the basically the permission for the reader account. Okay, we will discuss those things in the practical, that how to create a reader account and how to share the data. Okay, this is just some points, some theory of the data sharing, that you can understand some concepts of the data sharing. Okay, and there are basically two concepts in the data sharing. One will be the provider and another will be the consumer. Provider is who is sharing the data by creating a share object, and the consumer is who is consuming the data. Okay, or you can say provider as a sender or consumer as a receiver who is receiving the data. Okay, you can say like that as well. Okay, and provider, suppose that I am sharing the data to any non-Snowflake user by creating a user account. So I am the provider and I will create a reader account and I will share my data to the consumer. Okay, and the consumer is who is receiving the data. Suppose that I am creating the reader account, so who will use the reader account? That will be the consumer and receiver. Okay, so these are the points, provider and consumer. Okay, and shared data can be consumed by consumers own compute resources. Okay, suppose that I have shared some database to the user who is having a Snowflake account. Okay, so the Snowflake the data which I will share, the database which I am sharing to the other user, and whenever he will perform any DML, he will store any data to that, then it will just take the compute resources for that Snowflake user only. It will not be taken from mine. Okay, and if you will create a reader account and some suppose that reader account is performing any activity on the reader account, then that reader account will and cost will be paid from my provider account only. Okay, so this is basically some of the points of the data sharing, that what is provider, what is consumer, and what is a reader account and all this. Okay, and we will discuss how to create a reader account as well. Okay, in the practical session. Okay, so now let's move ahead and let's see some of the points of the data sharing and discuss all those things by the diagram as well. Okay, so basically this is a diagram for the data sharing. Okay, and first of all let me show you these things, indexes. Okay, so this is basically the database, and database is having a dark color, and this is a shared database read only, and this is having just a light color. Okay, this is for a light color and this is dark color. Okay, so basically this is provider, this is provider, and this is provider, and this is provider and consumer. Okay, so this is basically the provider Snowflake account, and it is having this database, and it is he is just sharing this data to this reader account. Okay, this is basically read account, so it will just read the data, and it is a consumer. Okay, it is a consumer means it is having a read account, or you can say it is having just you can say it is having a reader account as well, or it is having that Snowflake account only. Okay, you can use anything as well by creating a user account if you are a reader account, if you are sharing data to the non-Snowflake user. Okay, so this is basically the provider, and these are the consumer. Okay, suppose that this is a consumer, and this is a consumer, this is a consumer, and this is provider. So let's take about this consumer. So this consumer is having these three databases which is having permission for read only. Okay, and it is taking the data from this provider, and from this provider database as well. Okay, and in the similar way, this is a consumer, and it is having their own account, and it is having their own database, and it is just getting this data from this provider database. Okay, and it is having just permission for read only. Okay, and in the similar way, this is also consumer, this is having their own consumer database, and it is just getting this read only data from this provider database, and this also from this provider and consumer. Okay, you can see this is a provider. Okay, so this is that there we are having just a single provider, and it is just providing the data to the consumer. Okay, here also it is just a provider Snowflake account, and it is just providing the data to these consumers. Okay, and here this is a consumer which is taking the data, and this is a consumer which is just taking the data from all of the providers, but these consumers are not sharing the data. Okay, but here in this diagram, provider and consumer, in this provider and consumer, what they are doing, they are just at the same time they are just a provider as well as the consumer as well, because they are doing two things at the same time. They are just sharing their data, and they are just taking their data as well. Okay, so let's understand. So this is, suppose that this is a single provider and consumer account, and this is single provider and consumer account. Okay, so here this is a provider, it is just sharing this data to this provider and consumer second. Okay, and in the same at the same time it is just taking the data from some other provider, and it is having just a read only permission. At the same time it is just taking the data also, and it is just sharing this database 2 into this second consumer, and it is just sharing this database to the third consumer as well. It is just doing two things at the same time. It is just sharing this database to this consumer as well, and this consumer as well as you can see this is the database which he got from this provider as well. In the similar way, this is provider and consumer as well. Somewhere it is just taking the data from any provider, and some way it is just giving the data. Okay, so suppose that here in this database 1 it is just giving the data, so at the same time it is having a provider, because it is just providing the data to the consumer, and here it is just taking the data from another provider. So at this time it is a consumer, and here it is just providing the data to these two consumers. So in this time it is a provider, and here it is just taking the data from another provider, this provider, so it is a consumer here. Okay, so this database this account is just treating as a provider and consumer at the same time. Okay, so, and in the similar way here this is just taking the data, so it is a consumer. Here also it is taking the data from this provider, so it is a consumer, and here it is just giving the data, so here it is a provider. Okay, so these two Snowflake accounts is just providing the data and just getting the data from another provider at the same time. So what they are, these are these are just a provider or a consumer at the same time. Let's take an example of me also. Okay, suppose that I am having any Snowflake account. Okay, so sometimes I will just share my data to other users, and sometimes I will take data from the other users. So at the same time I am a provider and as well as a consumer as well. Okay, so this is basically the diagram of data sharing, and just let you know that what is these things, provider and consumer. Okay, the provider is a person who is just providing providing the data to the other users. Other user means consumer. Okay, you can call provider as a sender and consumer as a receiver. Okay, so this is basically the diagram of data sharing. Okay, so let's move ahead. Okay, and let's understand that what objects can be shared. Okay, database, schema, or table. Okay, so what is a share? First of all, let's discuss about what is share. Okay, so share are the named objects that contains all information required to share a database, like object grant and consumer account details. Okay, so basically share is we have to just for sharing, suppose that there is a one database and I want to share that database. For that we have to just create a share by just typing the syntax create or replace share, and after that we will give the share name. Okay, and after that we have to grant the permission to that share, that how many databases, how many schemas, and how many tables he is having a permission to show to that user who is just consuming the data. And whenever we will create a share, we will just give the name of the consumer account, that I want to share this database, this schema, this table to this Snowflake account. Okay, if you are doing the data sharing to the Snowflake user. Okay, so we will discuss how to create a share and how to grant the permission in the practical session. We will discuss. Okay, so don't be confused, just these are the terms understand here, and we will just do the practicals, then you will better understand those things. Okay, and here all objects can be shared with other account users. Okay, so you can share a table, you can share the external tables which we made on the external stages. Okay, and you can share a secure view, secure user defined functions, and secure materialized views. Okay, so these are the objects can be shared. You can share a database, you can share a schema, and all those things you can share. Okay, so this is and I want to tell you one more thing, that suppose that you want to share the database. So for database you have to give the permission by typing grant usage, and if you want to share a table then you have to use grant select. Okay, data for database or schema we use just grant usage, and for tables we use grant select. Okay, so this is a different thing. We will just understand when we will create a share and we share our data in the practical session. Okay, so that's all about this, that what objects can be shared. Okay, so let's move ahead. Okay, and let's understand some of the things, some of the terms about the reader account. So what is a reader account? Reader account is just a provider, only provider can create a reader account. Suppose that I want to share a data to you and you are not having the Snowflake account, so how can you see that data? So you will see that data by just a reader account. Okay, I will create a reader account and I will give the username and password to you, and you can see my data which I want to share with you. Okay, so this is basically a reader account. Okay, so you can see data sharing is only supported between Snowflake accounts. Okay, and obviously the data sharing will be just possible to the Snowflake accounts only. But if I want to share the data to you but you are not having the Snowflake account, okay, so then also there is an option to the Snowflake that by creating a reader account and giving the login ID and password to any of the user which is not having the Snowflake account, can see that data. Okay, so if you want to share the data with non-Snowflake users, we can create a reader accounts for them. Okay, I told you this thing. Provider will create a reader account and he will share the login ID and username and password with the user which is not having the Snowflake account, and he can see the data. Okay, reader accounts known as read-only accounts provide a quick, easy, and cost-effective way to share data without requiring a consumer to become a Snowflake customer. Okay, and suppose that there is your HR department or the any of the department in your company, and he wants the data, any data from the table, and he wants to just see the data. So and it is not, and they are not having any of the you can say any of the Snowflake account. Then what we will do, we will just create a reader account and give the login ID and password to them, and they can just see the data. And for the reader accounts, they are just having the select statement permission. They cannot perform the DML operations. Okay, and each reader account belongs to the provider account that created. Okay, as I have told you earlier that a reader account which is belongs to just the provider account. Suppose that I am just providing the reader account to you, then the owner of the reader account will be me only, that provider only. Okay, readers cannot perform any DML, they will have only select access. I have told you earlier this, that readers cannot perform any DML operations, they have the permission to just use the select access and they can see the data only. Okay, and billing will be calculated in the provider's account itself. This also I have told you earlier, that suppose suppose that I have created any of the reader account and given to you, then the billing of that reader account, whatever the resources you will use in the reader account, that billing will be just calculated in the provider's account only, in the who is providing that reader account, then that billing of the reader account will be just taken from the provider's account itself. Okay, so that's all about the reader accounts, and we will understand this thing in practical, that how to create a reader account. Okay, so this is all about the reader account. Okay, and let's understand the reader account with some figure. Okay, so here the index is same, database is just in the dark, and share database is read only in this just a light one. Okay, so this is basically the provider account, and it is just sharing the this data, and it is having just a read only permission, and this is a consumer account. Okay, so this is basically the Snowflake account, and this is also the Snowflake account. So he just sharing the data to the Snowflake users by just creating a share and having just a read only permission. It is a provider and it is a consumer. The consumer is a person who is just getting the data, and provider is a person who is just sharing the data. That's all we have discussed. Okay, so this is basically a reader account. So this is a provider account, and in the provider accounts only there is a reader account. Okay, there is a reader account. Earlier in the let's take an example of this. So this is another Snowflake account, and this is another Snowflake account. So what we are doing here, we are just this is a provider, and it is just sharing the data to the other Snowflake user. This box is another Snowflake user, and this box is one Snowflake user. So he is just sharing this data to this another Snowflake user, and it is having just a read only permission. This is a provider and this is a consumer. Okay, but here in the reader account, what we have to do, this is a reader account, this is a basically the whole provider account, and suppose that he wants to share the data to any of the non-Snowflake user who is not having their Snowflake account. Okay, so he is just creating a reader account, he is just sharing the data. So that reader account will be in that provider's account only. All the access of the reader account will be to the provider account only, and provider account only can create a reader account. So that's why this diagram is having these two reader account boxes in this whole Snowflake account only. Okay, because reader account is just belonging to the provider accounts. Okay, so he wants to share this database to any user which is non-Snowflake user. So he is just creating a reader account, and he is just sharing this database which is having just a read only permission, and here also it is just creating this reader account, and he is just sharing this data to this, and this data to this also, this database to this reader account only. He is granting the permission by creating a reader account. Okay, so this is how can you share the data to the non-Snowflake user by creating a reader account. Okay, and suppose that this is another provider account, another Snowflake user, and he wants to share the data to other user who is not having Snowflake account. So what we will do, he will just create a share, and after that he will just create a reader account, and he will just grant the permission, and he will share the data. Okay, so that's why I have created, that's why in this diagram it is reader account is having in this same Snowflake account. This whole box, rectangle box, is just one Snowflake account, but he just, this is a provider account, and this is just creating a reader account here in this same Snowflake account, and he will just give this reader account login ID and password, and the person who wants to see the data, he will just see the data by logging to the reader account. Okay, and here this is just sharing to the Snowflake user. So that's why it is in the some other this box is not here. Okay, and here we are just creating the reader account. So okay, so this is all about the reader account, how to share the data to the non-Snowflake user. Okay, and we will discuss all those things in the practical, then you will better understand that how to create a share and how to do all these things. Okay, then you will better understand those things, that how to create a reader account and how to share the data. Okay, so that's all for this session, that how to what is the share and how to share the data to Snowflake user and non-Snowflake user. Okay, and we will understand do the practical session where we will understand that how to create a share and how to share the data to other Snowflake users as well. Okay, we will discuss sharing the data to the Snowflake users and non-Snowflake user by creating a reader accounts. Okay, so that's all for today. In the next session we will discuss about sharing the data to the Snowflake users and non-Snowflake users as well. Okay, so that's all for today.